Yo, yo! Welcome to the first podcast I ever posted anywhere, and it is with the most important person in my life. The person who has taught me so much about enjoying life and being present in the moment and being happy. And I hope that I touch on some of those things in the following conversation. I hope you get to glean some of that from Maria as well. Uh, but to be fair, this conversation does not do it justice. Does not do our relationship does justice and does not do Maria justice. Um, but it's what I can do, so it'll have to do. And thanks for watching. Welcome to interview number 1 ever with the very special Maria de la Torre. So, question number 1 of interview number 1. What is your spirit animal and why?
My spirit animal is an owl, the owl.
Because you're so smart?
For many, many reasons. Number one, it is the animal associated with the goddess Athena. And for many, many years, Athena was a strong factor in my energy. So the owl was really, something that was almost natural, a natural fit for me. But also, the more I have observed owls, the more I have really taken my time to look at them. They're amazing animals, and they're unique in many, many ways. And what I love about owls that I would like to capture for myself is this ability to look at 360 degrees.
Why?
Because they have a neck that has a weird joint, so they can turn around and you can see everything around you. And what amazing thing when you only have maybe 280, here you have all around and around, and I just find that very interesting.
Well, why would you want that for yourself?
Number one, so I don't have to worry about somebody following me or anything. Just turn around and do that. But it's the idea that that animal can do something that I cannot do. I find that really special. I would love to be able to do it.
Have you ever seen an owl with no feathers?
I've never seen an owl with no feathers except at birth. At birth, I've seen owls at birth. And I had a pet owl for a few months, and so it had very little feathers because it came to me very young. But it developed all his natural coat, and so why do you ask that?
Just don't look it up. It'll ruin owls for you.
No.
They're real scary. But how old were you, and where were you when you had a pet owl?
I was maybe 24, 22, between 22 and 24, and I was living in the Amazon jungle. And somebody brought the owl. They found it on the road. It must have fallen off a nest and, got abandoned somehow, and then it stayed with me, and it grew up with me, and it was fascinating to observe its behavior. It didn't sleep at night, and it perched on my shoulder almost as if standing guard, and ate bugs. So it was good because we lived in the jungle, and so I was always concerned that there would be cockroaches or other bugs in there, but the owl just...
Did you name it?
Yeah.
What was its name?
Sophocles. It looked like Sophocles. So smart.
How? What were you doing in the Amazon jungle?
I was there as a wife of a man who was doing his social medicine engagement that doctors have to do when they finish medicine in Colombia before they get their diplomas signed. They have to do 1 year of medicine in the areas where doctor services are not readily available. That's how the country has resolved its shortage of doctors in distant regions, and so doctors have to do that social engagement in distant locations. And we chose this particular one, and we were there for a year, but we loved it. And then we extended and stayed 2 more years in another location.
What did you learn from the jungle?
That's a long one. I learned a lot. You know, on the first engagement, that first year that we were there, when I had the owl, I also decided that I wanted to collect insects for my high school. And so I made an insect collection, and I used the methodology that our teacher at school had taught us to capture the features of certain things. And so you did a very flat plaster mold that attached the insect or the object that you wanted to have for study, and that allowed it made it a little heavy, but it traveled well and it didn't get crushed in between paper, because a lot of people were using like light cardboard boxes and paper and things like that to collect insects, but that destroys their wings and breaks their legs. And so I spent a lot of time collecting these insects. So I learned how to use chloroform to get them to where I needed to get them, so that I could spread them when they needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I collected everything except for butterflies. I didn't want butterflies.
Why not?
Because I felt that butterflies were so beautiful. I didn't want to deprive others and nature of their beauty. And so I watched the butterflies. I enjoyed them, and they had a huge variety of very amazing butterflies. And then the other 2 years, well, that year I also learned about the local tribes that lived in the area. I learned some of their habits, and I learned some of the things that distinguish them, and I also learned about Jehovah's Witnesses and their stand on medical treatment. I didn't know, so that was something that really shocked me. And I also learned about allergies and anaphylaxis, because while we were there, I saw a woman who was 20 years old die of an intolerance to xylocaine.
Can you tell me about what were some of the habits of local tribes that you encountered?
Well, the women had the children and the men rested after the delivery. And so the women went and delivered in the river, came home with the baby at the back, and then kept on going while the man laid on the hammock, and they were taking care of him. He was so exhausted after this delivery. And there was also something that surprised me, because, you know, isolated as they are in this Amazon jungle, they still had things that I found unacceptable for women in other parts of the world. In this particular case, the women had to walk behind the man and keep a certain distance. They couldn't get close to him as they walked. He had the main presence as he approached the location. And they trained birds to eat bugs. And so they kept in their dwellings, they kept birds that they had semi-domesticated so that at night they would keep them bug-free.
So the men kind of took space away from the women, and you would say, like, in your life you had a lot of this Athena energy, and was this energy just kind of something natural for you, or was it also, beyond just being natural, a reaction to the environment? Maybe you were in corporate spaces during your career where you kind of needed to rely on that.
No, the question is a little confusing because I started having a picture of the Indian thing, and then when you brought in Athena, that faded in the background, and I remember, well the moment in which Athena became an important element in my life. And I was getting a divorce, and I was a little bit lost. I didn't know what to do, where to go, how to do things. I had a daughter, and there was a professor at the university where I was getting a degree, and she was an English professor, but she was a specialist in mythology. And she taught a mythology class for literary analysis and for literary uses, and went into how all of these mythologies had shown in literature, right and left from forever. And so she started her class in a very interesting way, because she started the class with a timer. She put the timer at a minute, and she started with herself, and she just, as her introduction, she says, I'm a recovering victim of sexual abuse, and then continued with her story, but nobody heard anything else. We were all, especially those of us like me, who had never had the courage to talk about it or to put it on the table. And so that was quite interesting. And this woman was doing a therapeutic intervention that I thought was quite interesting, because what she did is she had people connect with something through hyperventilation, where you hyperventilate and you disconnect your mind. It's kind of like a high meditation technique that not a lot of people do, but you hyperventilate in such a way that at some point you lose consciousness and you disconnect. And in this particular intervention, what she did is she had a hot tub, and so you could do the intervention in the tub, or you could do it out of the tub. And the idea that the reason that she offered the tub was if you wanted to have some kind of an in uterus experience, and I was not interested. I thought that was really hocus pocus. So I said, I'll sit. She had a couple of chairs, and I chose a rocking chair. And so I'm rocking in this rocking chair, And so start hyperventilating, and then the moment in which the disconnect happened, I saw myself vividly coming out of my father's head, like Athena was born out of Zeus's head, fully ready for the battle, and so I started telling her, this is what I'm seeing and this is what's happening and whatever. And so she, with her knowledge of mythology, started guiding that experience. And she says, well, do you know what Athena is and what she represents and what her strengths are and blah, blah, blah. And at the time, I really didn't know, very little. But what really stuck with me was the fact that Athena is the goddess of sailors, and she guides the sailors through the storm. And so I immediately saw myself in this divorce thing as, a sailor in a storm. And so immediately felt really empowered, and I don't know why, but never felt lost again. Never had this feeling of, I don't know what I'm going to do. After that intervention, everything became really, really clear. And I did things that today I cannot believe I did, and really surprised myself and really surprised people when I tell them, because, that's not something that you naturally think of. And that, the one thing that was really most impressive was that I took the telephone book and I picked the top divorce lawyers in the town. And I called every single one of them. And I invested maybe $2,000 at the time. And I went for a consultation with each one of them, making it conflict of interest for them to take my ex-husband as a client. So he was left with no good lawyer to represent them. Where did that come from? I don't know.
That's very Athena. I mean, she's also a goddess of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, obviously, Athena came through really strong and made things clear for you. As you've grown older, has that presence of Athena faded out or been replaced? Or
well, without knowing, my father had raised an Athena. I have no doubt in my mind. He was the one who taught me to, by example, to be fair, to be ethical, to really also be really mindful with finances. And so, always behaved, logically, and people would say how mature or whatever. I mean, to me, that was natural. And I actually was doing the management for my home finances and my school payments and everything since the age of maybe 12, because my father wanted me to learn how to do bookkeeping and how to reconcile a bank account after the expenses and that. And at the time, checkbooks were what we used, and so I had a checkbook and I had to sign it. I had to be careful with it, and at the end of the month, take all of the the stubs from the checks and add them, and make sure that what came in the bank was exactly what I had on the checkbook as a balance. So that was, Athena was there until that divorce became final. And, I go home and I have no man, and I'm thinking, I don't have what it takes to go out in the world flirting. I'm too mental, so I actually actively engage in the search for Venus. and eroticism and, sensuality, which I had none of, And so I learned also with different practices and readings, and it was quite happy for me to really feel the presence of Aphrodite in my life. When I was living in New Orleans, I just felt really full of female flirty, and I was single, so I could do whatever. I was not held because, I'm going to ruin my marriage or I have a boyfriend or whatever. No, and I went for it, and I had a fun time, and it was nothing about being promiscuous or having sex or nothing. It was just feeling the beauty of female and that energy, and being able to project it in a really fantastic way. And it was really good because at the time I was teaching Navy SEALs, and I could feel that energy really drew them into the class and got them hooked into what I was teaching, and they loved it. And so it was good, it worked well. And I noticed with other instructors that I brought in that the ones that had that Aphrodite energy were the ones that were more effective with those guys. So, interesting.
That would make sense why guys would pay more attention to somebody who's very feminine. Can you talk about what the importance of beauty is?
The importance of beauty?
Yeah.
When I think of beauty, I always think of a Brazilian doctor. And this Brazilian doctor was a young doctor. I don't even know if he was a resident or an intern. But what happened was that he was on duty in a hospital that was across from a favela, and there was a there was a circus act, and there was a fire, and there was a circus kind of like for the poor, and so a lot of the dwellers from this favela were burnt. And so this guy was in the emergency room, and so they were taking care of burn case after burn case. And then these patients started coming back because they could get no treatment. Plastic surgery was not available to them because they were poor and they had no insurance. And so this fellow, whose name was Ivo Pitangui, became a plastic surgeon, and twice a week he operated poor patients because he said that beauty is not a privilege for the rich. And so, I think that beauty is essential, and it's not only the beauty that will make a woman a beauty queen or a man a movie star. It's just somebody that would feel happy with the way they look.
Can you talk about how you have achieved personal satisfaction, and if you ever have felt that was lacking?
I think that when I started life, I wanted to be a doctor, and I couldn't be a doctor because I got very sick, but I wanted to be a doctor for two reasons. I didn't want to be a doctor that was in the operating room. I hated blood. I hated cuttings. I hated the anxiety that comes of having somebody's life in your hands, because you are treating their physical body. So I wanted to study medicine to do public health or to do psychiatry. And and life has turned out for me that I have been able to do both without really going for it. They have just come to me, kind of like life put things on your table where, a lot of my friends come to me for advice, and it's not that I am being a therapist to them, but I play the role of the therapist, which is I listen to them so that they can listen to themselves. And I also play devil's advocate when I hear them say something, and then I ask them if they're doing something entirely different. Did you forget? You know, kind of like a reminder. And so, in a way, that's what I thought I would like to do as a therapist. And then when I got the job with Operation Smile, then I understood what public health was about. And I had a lot of opportunities to do public health interventions in the high circles of ministries of health and universities in countries. And so it was good. It felt really good. And so I felt validated in a way that I didn't do medicine, but I got to taste what I wanted to do when I had thought about doing medicine. But, to talk about satisfaction, I have never felt, no, I lied. There was a time in my life in which I felt that my life was flat, completely flat, and I didn't know what to do or where to go. And so I would go out to the shop and buy myself these huge puzzles, 5,000 or whatever, the hardest ones that I could get. And without even showering or getting dressed or anything, get up in the morning in my pajamas and sit in front of this puzzle and sit there and look at all these pieces all over the place and not even knowing, trying, but not really finding them. And, I finally, luckily, got out of that, and I don't remember how, but I know why I got into that state. And it was because my ex-husband accepted a job that took him away from where we were. He was a resident, and he had just finished at Hopkins, and they offered him a faculty post so that he could stay there and teach, but he didn't want to be in academics, so he wanted to get as far away from that as possible because he wanted to make a lot of money. So he took a job and he never told me. And so he got home with a fur coat. I mean, he had just finished medical school, right? I mean, residency training, not medical school, it's residency training. And he showed with this fur coat, and I'm thinking, furs? I never asked for a fur. Why a fur coat? I didn't understand. And that was kind of like his pay. He was buying me so that I wouldn't be upset because he took this job that took me away from something that I was doing that was very meaningful to me, that I loved doing, that it was the first time that I was doing something creative, and that I had set up a business with a girlfriend, and we were very, very successful. And so all of a sudden I had to walk away from that. And so I got home to where we moved, and I didn't know what to do, While on the other place, I got up in the morning and I was designing and I was drawing and I was going to see contractors buying fabrics. We had 3 shops, and then we had representatives that were selling the clothes that we were making for children all over the United States. From that to nothing. And so it was kind of tricky. I sold my part to my partner, who turned around and sold everything to another larger facility. But it was a successful business, and I loved doing it. And so it was kind of hard. But, in my time and in my generation and in my culture, I had subscribed to the role of being a wife, and he was the main income, the most important income. And I wasn't sure. At the time, I was probably making more money with my little business. And who knows, I could have possibly made more if I had stuck with it. But we didn't know. Well, with his job as a doctor, he was making $1 million a year. So, so it was tricky. That was really tricky. But other than that, I think that the things that I have chosen to do in life as jobs give me satisfaction because of the nature of what they are. As a teacher, I have a privilege that not a lot of people have in their professions, because I really have the possibility of touching somebody's mind in something that I feel is kind of magical. Because when you learn a language, you're not only learning words in another language, but you are reaching one or two or many cultures. And when the students discover that, they're so amazed. It's like such a fantastic opportunity for them and a fantastic moment for them that I don't need anything. They don't need to tell me anything. When I get to see that, the satisfaction is unbelievable. When I see, I have many of the students that I've had who have stayed in touch and with whom I have friendship. Mark Sluter being one of them that you met in Texas. Just to see what they have taken this language that I opened the door to them to, and what they have done with it. Mark is the one that has done the least, but the one that has probably done the most meaningful to himself, and as he did missionary work in Nicaragua, and they were building homes, and he took one of his children at this gig, and it was all thanks to his Spanish, and he just loved every minute of it, So, but when you have that, when you really touch, because not every time you teach, you touch that person. But when you touch that person, there's nothing that can be more rewarding to me than that, to know that I've touched somebody's life for the better. So
I can vouch for that. I'm gonna pivot here. How do you keep things simple in your life? Like, are you the type of person who needs to know the next step or needs to have a purpose, or what would you say to that?
I mean, that's a multiple tier kind of question because, I mean,
you can just answer the first one. Like, how do you keep things simple?
It's really hard, and I think that that's something that as you age and you realize what life really is and how much time you have spent really in things that are futile, then you change. You don't want to be there anymore, and so I'm not going to spend time trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of the year. It falls into place. But this is, what I was thinking today, that if my friend gets, her health turns for the worse, I don't know how we're going to handle it, but we're going to have to handle it one way or the other. I'm out of here, and Timothy will have to handle it, and we'll have to hire somebody to do what I do, but I'm out of here.
You're going to Washington?
To Baltimore, yeah.
Baltimore?
Mm-hmm.
How, so when you were talking about things that are futile, could you give me an example or two or more about what kind of things you spent time thinking about when you were perhaps my age? Because or younger or older.
Well, I kept on thinking about the future. You know, nothing can be more futile than to plan for the future, for me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you plan and plan and plan, and then you wake up in the morning, and then something happens, and everything that you spent time planning, whatever, is out the window because something minimal or something, whatever happens, and all that plan is out the window. You know, so. Planning for the future is something that I don't like to do. I mean, I may plan my next vacation, but again, if I have to go to Baltimore tomorrow, my next vacation will be without me. You know, all that plan that I made to go to Italy will have to happen without me if Timothy's willing to go. And you know, I mean, that holiday, it was done for him anyway because I've been to where we're going already 2 or 3 times. So he's never been, I thought, given that he loves Roman antiquities and that you have Pompeii and Herculaneum there, he has to see that. He absolutely has to see the fantastic mosaics there and everything.
So people, when you say like planning for the future is useless, basically, there are definitely people out there that would disagree. So do you mind specifying what kind of planning for the future is, and or that you're talking about, and when planning for the future does actually come into play?
I would say that planning for the future for me I would plan for the future to the extent that I know that I have health coverage in my old age when I'm not working and a little source of income. So I guess you contribute to whatever your country does for retirement, either it's a pension or a social security type scheme or whatever. Because what you absolutely don't want, and I'm speaking that because I've seen it happening around me often, is to get to the age in which you're no longer working and not to have those things sorted out. So my husband's daughter, who is an English teacher, she gets all the satisfaction, but she's working overseas for these companies that don't provide any retirement, anything. And, you know, 1 year is fine for the overseas experience, and 2 years, okay, and 3 years maybe because we want to get the teaching experience. But once those are done, get out of there and go to a place where you can start building something for that old age in which you need to be able to take care of yourself. You don't need to say, oh, my husband will take care of me, or I will inherit the money, or no. Take care of yourself. Don't become some kind of an obligation for somebody, or a case for your country or for your state where they have to provide what you didn't plan on organizing for yourself. But I would leave the rest very open, very flexible. I remember my ex-husband kept on getting these job offers. They're offering me a job as a radiologist in Brisbane, Australia. Would you come? Sure, I'll come. Anytime I'll come. Even if today Timothy told me, oh, there's an opportunity for me to do something in Timbuktu, I'll go. And I'm not attached to a place. I'm attached to people. So it's always hard to part from people. That's to me a challenge.
How have you dealt with loss, and not necessarily through death, but maybe loss of a relationship, like in your divorce or a friendship, because
No,
it
I
doesn't.
mean, to me, my first major loss in life was when I left Colombia and I had to say goodbye to my dad. That was the hardest thing because he and I were very close. And we remained close. We spoke on the phone and he wrote me letters, but it was not the same, you know. I mean, I spent the weekends with him because he and my mother separated, and we shared the love of singing and the love of music, and so we spent weekends singing and playing instruments and having fun. You know, it's just lovely. And so when I left, I knew I was leaving that, and I was leaving my dad, who was the source of all that beauty. And so when my father died, the only thing that I wanted was his musical instrument, and I got it. So
What was it? A guitar?
kind of it's an instrument that's guitar-like, but it's far from a guitar. Really has the shape, smaller shape, shaped like a guitar but smaller, and instead of having 6 strings, it has 4 sets of 3 strings. So it has 12 strings. It's called a tiple.
Should a person follow their brain or their heart? And if both, maybe, like, when would they follow one or the other?
I don't know, Theo. I don't know that one. You know, I mean, I don't know if it's follow, but, you know, I have found myself writing to the husband of my friend who's really sick in my mind and in my heart. You know, that's where he is right now, and I don't want to choose. You know, I don't want to choose because I want to think about them, and I want to have them ever present in my thoughts. But I want to feel with them. I want to feel their pain. I want to feel their fear. I want to feel, and so I write that to him in every message that I send them, always in my mind and in my heart. And I think that if you can, you should go with both.
I guess, well, actually, before I go into that, one thing that you spoke about is about dealing with loss while it's happening. Can you explain why that's important?
I don't know that dealing with loss while it's happening is important. I think that dealing with loss is important.
Okay.
You know, I think that I would almost make it essential teaching at the elementary school level to teach people how to deal with loss and mourning, so that they can be free from that and they can really be more productive, because you spend a lot of energy without even knowing in dealing with those feelings, and you know, at the end you don't remember why they're there. And if you acknowledge the loss and you find the way of mourning, and you embrace the loss as part of the process, that you're better to continue, and that you're better for the next adventure or engagement or relationship or I once failed at school, and it was a huge loss to lose the feeling of being invincible, to lose the illusion that you were among the best, and also to deal with the frustration of really feeling that loss was inflicted unfairly, and that was hard. That was really, really hard. But I didn't mourn that until way later. But not way, maybe 2-3 years later. But it took away all my productivity. So yeah, and almost paralyzed me because I didn't want to do anything. It was not because I felt frustrated, and it was not because I felt that I was going to fail again or I was going to be unable to do it, but it was because I didn't want to give the people who I felt treated me unfairly the satisfaction of seeing me dealing with the loss. So anyway, let's take a break. Okay. Okay.
Part 2 of the interview. We can start with it. What do you think about, is it important to speak another language, and what does traveling mean to you?
Well, that's a question that my profession and my work could answer, that I wouldn't even have to answer, because I wouldn't be teaching and I wouldn't have become a linguist if I didn't think that speaking other languages is important. For me, it's essential. Whenever possible, I prefer to read a book in the author's original language and not translated by some foreign interpreter. And also, when you travel, you really get a lot more out of your trip and your experience, your local experience, if you speak the local language and you can communicate with the people there.
And where have you traveled to that is important to you, and what is your relationship with those countries?
Well, I could say that my travel experience through my life can be divided in 3. I have done trips for work, and so the job that I did was quite important. And so they were trips that were satisfactory and fulfilling. For example, when I went to Haiti after the earthquake to help the people there set up training that would get the healthcare providers better qualified to address emergencies like they were dealing with. Then there is the family trip, where you go back home and you visit friends and family, and you get to eat the things that you ate when you were growing up. And that trip is heartwarming, because you always get with friends that bring back memories that are really little bits of gold, especially when you're aging and you just don't even think about those things anymore. And then last but not least is the trip that I choose to do because the location that I'm going to is a location of interest to me. And those trips are probably, I don't want to say the most valuable, but the most interesting, because it's an ongoing learning experience for me when I go to these places and I see what the people have done in terms of buildings and how they developed their religion and how they established the worship sites. And in that sense, India is probably been the most important trip for me, where I really didn't expect what I found and really had a fantastic experience, and keep on going back for more and more and more to the different regions that I haven't visited. I have visited very, very little of India, and I'm looking forward to exploring more.
What is it about India?
India, in a way, is a very sad place because of the contrast between the treasures that are there and the poverty. The huge population and also their caste system provides for something that I don't agree with. However, when you go there, and for example, because I am into cooking, and you go to the regions where all of these spices are produced and then processed and then turned into amazing ingredients that they put into all the foods they eat, I am wowed by it. I mean, it's really fantastic. Then you go to see these temples that have been built, almost at the same time that the Chinese were doing some of their building, of the fantastic building before, before, even Columbus got to America. And, the knowledge these people had, I have found, for example, in South America with the Inca, where they were amazing astronomers and incredible builders. Now, the Indians were very sophisticated, like the Chinese in their architectural design, which for the Inca, it was just primitive if you look at what they built, even though it was fantastic.
What is your view on the United States, particularly in the light of globalism?
My view of the United States. Well, I find the United States to be the most ethnocentric country that I've been to. The Americans, they don't even bother to look at other cultures when they're traveling, and they're expecting to find the same standard of things that they're accustomed to in America in many, many cases. I don't want to generalize. It's, but I can say it's probably the stereotype of your average American, where they're surprised to find that sports are not predominant in many, many countries, especially through education. Mm-hmm. They're amazed that people don't speak English. They're shocked when they get to places and there's 3 rooms that share 1 bathroom. And so, having said that, I have to add that I was treated very well when I first arrived to the United States as an immigrant. I was going with an American husband, now ex-husband, and very welcoming. And it's the country where I have had the possibility to develop all the things that I wanted to develop. from getting the education that I wanted, from getting the financial support to get all that education, from being able to set up the business, to succeeding as a woman without having to have, like I would have had in my own country, the sponsorship of a male, a father, a brother, or a husband.
When I talk with you about my future or my relationships and I start to overthink, you always point it out and tell me to listen to my heart. What do you mean by that, and what is the feeling you are trying to get me to listen to?
Well, I believe that we think with our mind, but we also think with our heart. Many times we go with the things that you think with your mind, or we tend to go with the things that we think with our mind because they're easy to rationalize, and it's easy to see the good and the bad and the ugly for those things. However, when you think with your heart, it's really feeling and intuition. And so a lot of people are very nervous about that because there's no way they can measure as they project what it's going to do in the future. It's just you feel it's right or you feel it's wrong, but it's not it's right or it's wrong. So by that I'm not saying that if your intuition tells you to do something criminal that you should do it. No, that's not what I mean. It's more thinking with what makes you passionate, what gets you excited, not what gives you comfort, not what will make you money, but what will give you happiness.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is going to be the last question.
Ooh.
I know that you hate to box yourself in or make rules for your life, but can you please put that aside and give me 2 rules for your life and why you follow them? And one of those rules can be that there are no rules.
I very, very, I don't like to box myself, but the rules, absolutely. My number one rule in terms of how I conduct my relationship is monogamy. I absolutely is the number one rule for me. I'm not going to cheat on my partner, not ever. And if he cheats on me, he's out. So if you call that a rule, that is a rule. And then if there's another rule, it kind of goes with that. It's the same rule, but it's more generic. Is honesty. You want to be honest. If you ask me, I want to answer honestly. And I believe that if you follow that rule in particular, you save yourself a lot of problems, and you save yourself from a lot of ambiguous situations that you really didn't want to be in, but because you didn't have the guts of saying no or of saying how you felt, all of a sudden you find yourself not being true to yourself and doing something you don't want to do.
Okay.